She is the director of the Environmental Health and Water Quality Program at RTI International, familiar, with an integrated background in environmental chemistry, toxicology, risk assessment, and environmental policy. She blends practical field and laboratory expertise with cross-cutting technical knowledge and a love of collaboration to improve public health and the environment. She ideates, develops, and leads multidisciplinary community-engaged research on topics such as lead in drinking water and PFAS forever chemicals. Let's welcome Jennifer Hoponick Redmon.
Thank you. Great to be here tonight. I feel seen because on the outside I'm a middle-aged woman, but on the inside I'm about an 80-year-old Sicilian man. So I tell people that a lot. So we're tonight going to be talking about environmentally healthy habits at home. And we have talked about a lot of things today. We are wondering, how does our environment affect our health? We've talked about how general stressors affect our health, the microbiome, food, and even how our neighborhood built environment affects our health. And now we're going to be delving into the household to figure out what additional environmental stressors there are, but also what we can do about it today. So our focus today is common contaminants, specifically lead and PFAS forever chemicals. Lead, to start, lead is a metal that's been used in a variety of products historically, most notably lead-based paint, gasoline, and lead in water infrastructure, including our piping, plumbing, and solder. It has been banned in lead-based paint and gasoline, and there are increasing restrictions on it in water, but it still affects us in our environment, especially for older households and in older cities, and it's also used in other products still. The reason this is important is because lots of research has shown that absolutely no safe level of lead exposure exists. Any level of lead exposure can cause health effects that are irreversible, lifelong, and they're cumulative as more exposure occurs. And some of these effects include reduced IQ, inattention and behavioral difficulties, including ADHD, reduced lifetime earnings, juvenile delinquency, and even in adults, things such as hypertension, abdominal pain, and anemia, and more. So where could lead be in our households? So first of all, we can find lead in dust in our household, and we can find it in the soils outside of our household, especially in homes that are built pre-1979, and also in older cities where leaded gasoline used to be used. We also find it in water. It's common because there's still allowable levels of lead in piping and plumbing infrastructure in the US, and strides are being taken to update those, but in the meanwhile, we often find lead at the tap. Lead can also be found in toys that children play with, along with foods. So I'm going to first go over simple soil and dust precautions that you can take, especially for residences that are pre-1979 or if you live near older roadways or airports. First of all, on the outside, you can use above-ground beds for gardening instead of putting plants directly in the soil where you live, and that can reduce your lead exposure. You can also designate play areas that are away from the siding of the house or the drip line, and also away from the roadways for any children, where they're less likely to dig into lead-contaminated soil. On the inside of your house, you can use just typical cleaning methods, but making sure that you're using a HEPA vacuum that actually filters out dust so it doesn't put it back into the air, and that you also use wet dusting. So instead of feather dusting and then you're just re-putting it back into the air, making sure you're removing it over time. And then lastly, when you do renovations, making sure that there are lead-safe precautions that are taken, and contractors should know how to do that now. Regarding low-cost ways to get the lead out of water, the only way to truly know if lead is in your water is to test it. We do know that in the state of North Carolina, we've tested every child care center in the state at this point, and lead is commonly found. We found that in 91% or 92% of childcare centers have lead at least one tap, and 12% are above the state action level. And so we would expect that there's similar levels in households in the state of North Carolina, but the good news is that there's easy things that you can do about it. First of all, you can practice clean water habits, and that includes using only cold water for drinking and cooking, even if you're using it for tea or for infant formula, because hot water leaches more lead. You can also flush your water regularly overnight when you wake up in the morning, especially after long holidays, things like that. And then low-cost solutions include replacing faucet fixtures and also installing and maintaining a lead-certified filter. And we found that those techniques in North Carolina and child care centers have been effective to get lead levels down to 0 or close to it. There's also ways that you can try to reduce exposure to lead in toys. One of those ways is to try to ideally not purchase toys that are more likely to have lead in them. This includes toys that are made of metal or plastic, that have stickers or paint on them, that are likely to be imported or antiques. I definitely have all of those things in my household right now, right, with 3 boys. So another thing you can do is, you're not going to get rid of everything that could have lead, but try to reduce mouthing those toys. Try to make sure that your children aren't playing with toys while they're eating. They wash hands after playing, and they wash hands before eating. And research has shown that almost about 1 in 5 toys can have as much lead in them as lead-based paint. So it is important to try to take these habits and make sure that our children aren't exposing themselves to additional lead while they're playing. Some common culprits include jewelry. You can look online at the Consumer Product Safety Commission website. They do recalls sometimes. Sometimes it's really random things like special character shirts that were painted on and things like that, things you might not expect. Reducing lead in foods, it really depends on where the food's produced, processed, packaged, and stored. But in general, there's some easy things that you can do. First off, varying your spices that you use, both the types of spices and the brand. Some spices like turmeric are more likely to contain high lead. So individuals that eat a lot of curries, for example, in some cases are at risk of lead poisoning. And so if you're worried about that, concerned about that, you can contact your county health department. You can even ask your pediatrician for a lead test for your child or yourself. Another thing that's easy to do is to really try to avoid juices overall. Try to drink nice cold water, as said earlier. And apple juice is a major culprit a lot of times. Now, sometimes okay, but regularly, juices, especially how they're packaged and processed, can have more lead in them. Purchasing fresh foods again, we talked about the Mediterranean diet earlier. That's better. It's less processed, less packaging. The storage sometimes of that can contain more lead. And then washing produce before use. Okay, now we're going to pivot to PFAS. So what are PFAS? They're also known as per- and polyfluoroalkyl substances. These are substances that repel grease, oil, and water. They do not degrade easily. And because of that, they're often called forever chemicals. Because they don't degrade easily, though, and they do a good job of being waterproof and stain repellent, they've been used in a wide variety of products. They are found in 97% of Americans' blood at this point and in most community water systems. And we also can see them in our household. We bring those products in. They can be in our food. They can end up being in our dust and in other things in the household. Unfortunately, increasing research is showing that exposure to PFAS compounds increases the likelihood of certain cancers, along with other risks such as hypertension, high cholesterol, even a reduced immune response to vaccines and preeclampsia. So where could PFAS be in the household? So some key areas include furniture and carpet. The next time you go to buy a couch and they ask do you want this to be stain repellent, you can say no, and then just get water and a rag with some soap if you get some stain on your couch, right? Clothing's another major culprit. It's even outdoor clothing that's touting itself as environmentally responsible. PFAS are on the top of Mount Everest because of outdoor clothing, right? It can be found in personal care products, including floss, even period underwear it's in, things that sometimes are touted as reusable, but it's not degrading and it's trying to be water or stain repellent. We also find it oftentimes in cookware and food packaging. It can be found in nonstick cookware that's even touting itself to be PFAS-free at this point, but maybe substituting to a different compound that's similar. Fast food wrappers and takeout containers are another culprit, along with microwave popcorn. And then because of its use and its entrance into the environment, we can find it in our water at the tap. So what are some simple PFAS precautions that we can take? First of all, you can say no to water and stain repellent products, ideally. Do you really need that product, right? There's not labeling for PFAS compounds at this point, but if something's touting itself to be water or stain repellent, there's a pretty good chance that there's PFAS in it. So do you need it? How important is it? Two, if you're eating out, you can bring your own container. So for example, if you're getting coffee, you can bring a stainless steel coffee mug. Not only is it better for the environment and more sustainable, but also it's potentially better for your health. If you are packaging food into a takeout container and you're at a restaurant, you can wait for it to get to room temp. That's less likely to leach the PFAS into your food. That's an easy way to do something. Three, when you're at home, you can use cast iron or stainless steel for cooking, and pop your popcorn in a pot, ideally, not in the microwave, where the only reason paper doesn't light on fire in the microwave is because you have these PFAS compounds in it. And lastly, you can install and maintain a water filter. Under the sink filters work well, activated carbon or reverse osmosis. So I'm happy to take any burning questions or comments on how to improve your environmental health in your home, and thanks for listening.
Wonderful. I think we just have time for one question. We're going to go right here.
I was just curious if there's a major difference between skin contact and ingesting the lead, or PFAS even, is there an increase versus ingesting versus the skin?
That's a good question. So the question is whether ingesting these contaminants is more important than the dermal exposure. And the short answer is yes. For lead, oral ingestion via drinking, eating, and that sort of thing is much more important than dermal exposure. For PFAS, the assumption is that still ingesting it is most important. However, there is burgeoning research that needs to be done on dermal exposure. In North Carolina, we have PFAS in some of our water bodies where you actually might also recreationally play, and there needs to be more done on that.
Thank you, Jennifer. Wonderful tips.